This week's episode is explicit for adult themes and language.
This is Literary Roadhouse. One short story, once a week. My name's Gerald.
I'm Andy.
And I'm Anais.
And this week, we have been reading a story called Suffering in Motion by McKenna Marsden. And if you haven't read the story yet, pause the podcast, go and read the story, links on the website, and come back. Today, we're with Hannah Clark as she struggles with just about everything in her life. Her relationship, her sexuality, her mom, her training for the Boston Marathon, mainly the marathon. When she gets an injury in her foot, she struggles against it for a while and is upset that it might mean she can't do the marathon. There's a whole area of indecision in her life right then. Even a conversation with her mom is stilted and interrupted by connection issues. She's in a relationship, but does she want it to be long-term like her girlfriend partner wants? But once she makes the decision to bail on the marathon, her life starts to turn around a little. Her mood begins to lift as spring begins. She's happier at work. Things become more decisive as she sees the fog of indecision clearing as she goes to the start line of a local 5K race, believing they are limitless.
Okay. Andy, how'd you feel about today's story, or this week's story?
Super liked it.
Oh, good.
Really?
Yeah, no, it was just really...
I'm so surprised.
Yeah, no, it was funny and it was clever and... Okay, here's something that like I kind of stopped halfway through, right? As I was reading the beginning of the story, I was like, man, something about the prose seems weird. Like the way they keep referring to Hannah, but I couldn't put my finger on it. And then after Hannah decided that Hannah's pronoun was going to be they, only then did the story start using pronouns for Hannah. Before that, it did not refer to Hannah with a pronoun. And I was just like, well, that's just neat, isn't it? I knew something was wrong.
Yeah, you're right, because I got the first page, it was about 13 mentions of her name in the first page.
Their name.
And you just think, yeah, and to be honest, one of my notes is it's the first time I've read a story where the sort of non-binary pronoun was used. And I found it a little bit difficult at first, because 60 odd years of using they to indicate more than one person takes a little bit of untraining. But I sort of got into it, and I really enjoyed it.
I'm glad you guys really liked it, because I'm kind of... I don't... Dislike is too strong. I did not dislike it, but I'm kind of... Okay. All right. Like, for some reason, it just didn't quite suck me in the way that I'd like to be. So I want to see why you guys liked it so much and see if that brings my appreciation of the story up. That's always delightful when that happens on the show.
Yeah, I think one of the things that concerned me, as I said in the introduction, is she was struggling with everything. So it's very much a downbeat story, and I just think, it's one of these sort of misery memoir stories again, where everything's bad and she struggles with everything. But actually, with the change in season and the decision to not try and run the marathon, everything started to turn around, I thought, and she got happier at work and she became more decisive.
Yeah. I think for me, the biggest thing was the stakes never quite seemed high enough. You know what I mean? Like, like, I understand for her personally, not being able to do the Boston Marathon is, like, really awful right now. But we all know it's so temporary. She knows it's temporary, and I'm glad that her accepting this is good for her emotional mood. But it's just, like, it never felt like the stakes. She didn't lose a leg. She's not done with running for the rest of her life. You know, like, there was just, or like, the part where you actually use the title, Suffering Emotion, it's when she's talking to, or they are talking to their girlfriend, Edie, and, Edie wants to move in together. Their lease is up in June. And then Hannah has this, like, a moment where she's like, that the suffering was already put in motion basically like just by virtue of having a relationship, because at some point you'll have to decide whether or not to move in or break up. And it's a little bit like, yes, true. Again, the stakes just always seem low. And I think that was maybe what kind of had me a bit like, you'll be fine. You'll all be fine. And even the whole thing where Hannah starts identifying as non-binary, I liked that it wasn't super dramatic, right? I liked that it wasn't like, and now you will be disowned from the family, because it makes it seem like you could only suffer in the most extreme of cases. And that's not true. She's still just bothered by the fact that her well-intentioned mother isn't, or their well-intentioned mother isn't fully seeing them the way that they would like to be seen, and is still trying to like work around like, well, don't get taken up with these fads. You're so independent. Women can be whatever they want. But like, again, while I understand that that's irritating and the sort of thing that you take to your therapist for sure, it just feels so low stakes, Like, I think that was my biggest issue with it, was at no point was I just like, boy, is this suffering. It's sort of like the common problems that people deal with. Everyone's kind of, you know what I mean, that you go to therapy for, and then you're fine.
Yeah, I did. I mean, we had this discussion in Slack beforehand that if you are, because many years ago I was a bit of a runner, and in more recent times I was a cyclist, and if you are slightly obsessive about things, you get terribly obsessed about numbers and timings and training and schedules, and I could understand where she was coming from, because planning and training for a marathon is a very, very sort of, if you're going to do it properly, it's a very strict regime, and training up and training down, and so to me, I sort of understood how important it was for her to try and run this injury off, to try and get past the injury. And it's always that. I've had things in the past where coming up to making a decision is a terrible sort of shall I, shan't I, am I going to make the wrong decision, the right decision? Once you've made the decision, then all of a sudden you can deal with everything else, because the decision is made and that's behind you, and then you've just got to deal with life as it happens in front of you. So I think it was a really big deal for her to this injury that was blighting her training, and I think that was very important for her.
I don't know though. I think it's a bigger deal. And you're like, oh, running. That's my impression of you, Anais.
It's true.
Yeah.
You'll run again. You will do another marathon. You will do physical therapy.
Yeah, but it's not about running. It's about Hannah's body being just bullshit.
Her body's not, though.
Oh. Yeah, but okay. Men's bodies just let them run faster than her, even though they're shittier runners and they're not as dedicated and they don't work as hard. And just by virtue of their bodies, they get to be faster, and that's horseshit. And Hannah's body, even though she's trained it to fucking perfection, she doesn't get any of the advantages of men's body in her running time, and then still gets stuck with men's body's ailments. And it's like, that's horseshit. That's just horseshit. And Hannah doesn't really know how to relate to her body. It's not right, and it's off. And that colors everything that Hannah's doing. And it's a story about horseshit and why she doesn't get to be a shark.
I think that's a good way to look at it. If you focus on the body part of it, it is a lot better, right? Where she sort of accepts, well, yes, but I have plantar fasciitis and I am who I am. Also,
we've done a terrible job with Hannah's pronouns. I just want to be clear.
We're doing a horrible job.
We're really bad at this.
Also, the they and them thing, to what Gerald was saying in the beginning, I almost wish we'd make up a new one, just because the plural thing, whenever she was they were in a scene.
Well, some people have different ones.
They do.
Hannah wanted they, and you need to respect that.
Yeah, Hannah wanted they, I know. But in the scenes, when I'm reading the scenes where there's groups of people, sometimes the they and them, I wasn't sure if it was referring to Hannah or to like the store customers or to her roommates, like for a second, only in those scenes.
Yeah, but I think that's intentional. I think that's just very clever writing. Like, a couple of those are ambiguities are like, Oh god, I don't know if I can find one, and I certainly can't search for the word they. That won't help at all. There were a couple where it was like I didn't know if it was referring to Hannah or the crowd, and on purpose. And I just thought it was clever. It was very clever craft. I liked it.
I mean, you're right about that, where like there's the line where she likes they because it contains multitudes, which I think is cool. I think it's very cool that it contains the multitudes. But just to what Gerald was saying, the plural singular thing is something that's hard to unlearn, you know, like when you've been reading your whole life. Just in particular that part. The gender part's not as big a deal.
Yeah, and I think it's important that we do get it right. We can't just say, oh, for goodness sake, that you're wrong for choosing that pronoun,
right.
in the way that you're wrong for being offended by this, or you have to understand, you have to meet them and understand where they're coming from, and I think that's important. It's just that I'm just an old man and it takes a little while.
It requires work, but the work is not that much, and it's worth it. But I like what you're saying, Andy, about looking at it more from the perspective of, this is horseshit. My body, I train it to perfection. I do more work than any guy, and a guy will do better time than me. Like Brandon.
Right. Just 10 minutes faster.
Brandon. Everybody hates Brandon.
Except Brandon's nice.
Right, he's super nice.
He's super nice.
Yeah.
And that's what, one thing Gerald, your point to, once she accepts who's not going to, or they accept they're not going to be in the marathon anymore, and they realize that their co-workers were rooting for them this whole time, right?
Right. Everyone wanted Hannah to do well.
Because there was that moment where Lindsay was like, yeah, you should probably go talk to a doctor, where she's like, Lindsay won't give me free physical therapy. And I'm just like, Hannah, like, you need to calm down. Like, this is a lot. Yeah. They were a very angry person before they made that decision.
And what is that thing where there's a description of a sort of mentality where you think everything is against you. That what is that?
I think they call that Geraldism.
Oh, do they? Okay. No, they don't. It's but that thing I think she did. Yes, I think you're right, Annie. She got into this thing where everything is against her and nobody likes her and that is another turnaround in the story, that again, as soon as she makes that decision and said, look, I can't do it, even they become nice to her in her head.
Yeah, that was something that kind of made, so Hannah's like bracing themselves for their mother to not react perfectly to the non-binary thing is almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way, because it's like their mother could basically only say one thing, must be this one thing to get it right, or Hannah will say, see, she sucks, and it's like totally unfair. Like Hannah's like so like bitter before she makes before they make that decision, before they accept that they're they have plantar fasciitis, there will be other marathons, it will be okay. At some point you need to make a decision with Edie, you're going to be with them or not, you need to commit to whatever it is. Which I thought was interesting, because like I kind of felt a little bad for their mother, a little bit like their mother could do better, but give your mother time to do better. Like they'll just jump down her throat. She loves you.
I don't know. Mom was
I don't know. I feel like in general you should be a lot more generous with people who are trying.
I don't want to cut her mom no slack, but I'm not cutting as much slack as you did. There's a lesser amount of slack that I cut Hannah's mom.
I think there's a lot of slack you need to cut people who love you and are trying and are a couple conversations away from getting it, right? Like I don't think their mother is going to resist this forever. She just needs a little more hand-holding to get there, and she will, right? So
yeah, it's still obnoxious though, just in the way of everything else.
Yeah. It's the obnoxious thing you definitely talk about with your significant other and your therapist.
Yep.
For sure.
It's a hot button topic for Andy, this is, isn't it? No, get it right or else you're evil.
Well, just that, it's annoying, and Hannah shouldn't have to deal with it, ideally. Because who doesn't have to deal with that? Binary gendered people.
Well, Yes.
Just don't have to deal with it.
but it's true. It's true. But this is what I was saying before. When you don't make it the whole, you are now disowned for not being gender conforming. I like that that's not the only option, right? That there are different ways to be aggrieved. However, even so, a binary, like a cisgender person may not have this particular issue, but like this is like kind of like they'll have some other issue where they feel like their well-intentioned parent is not fully, you know what I'm saying? Like it kind of has the same degree that everyone will experience, even if the particulars of that thing are different, right? It's not so out of the proportion of the general experience, right? Cisgender people at some point in their lives will also be like, my parents are doing this thing, it's annoying, and talk about it in therapy, right? That's what therapy is. How did your parents make you feel unseen and unloved? Like
mess you up. Yeah, I think people who have a new way of presenting themselves, I think it would be nice if they understood how it feels for those to whom this is a very strange thing and it's not something they've come across in their life before. And I think in the same way that I'm talking like me, older generation people have to go some way to understand what the people are talking about and understand their feelings and all that. I think I sometimes get the feeling that coming the other way, it is quite binary. It's quite you get me or you don't, and there doesn't seem to be much leeway or much time for the people who don't understand to understand. It's like, this is how it is. Do you understand or not? And I just get that feeling. It's a bit sort of
black and white.
Dare I say? Yeah, I think. But then that's my perspective from my point of view. So,
There's an advice column in Slate called Dear Prudence that I like a lot. And the advice columnist is Daniel Ortberg. It's a transgendered man who he covers all kinds of issues. I love Dear Prudence because the crazy stuff that people send in. But I think because he is trans, he gets a disproportionate amount of like trans and LGBTQ questions that you won't necessarily see in some other columns, right? He gets everything though, everything. But one of the things that I really like about his approach to this is when people talk about like he'll get some questions that are like, oh, should like one of the groomsmen in my party is trans. Do I let all guests know not to like use the wrong pronouns with him? And a lot of times Daniel's sort of response to that is very refreshing, where it's like, when someone made a mistake because it's not habit and they try to correct themselves, and when they're doing it intentionally to make you feel bad about yourself. You just know it. You can tell by how they do it. And that tends to guide the advice that he gives a lot of people, which is like, and also the other thing is it's how important is it to the person that you're trying to protect, right? Where like, does your groomsman want you to do this? Or maybe they've accepted, some people are going to get this wrong. As long as you're not doing intentionally to hurt me, I can just correct and move on, right? And I like that sort of approach of, yeah, I understand this is going to be hard for some people. As long as you're not doing it to hurt me, you're not doing it because you're an asshole, then there's a lot of room for like, oh, okay, let me just quickly correct you on that pronoun. Please get it right moving forward. And the person goes, oh, okay, right? Like you can just very casually, assertively, and in a generous way, correct someone. And I like that approach that Daniel does a lot. I think about it a lot. Just like sometimes people get it wrong on purpose. Sometimes they don't, right? Like, yeah.
It's all to do with tolerance, isn't it? And I think it's the same that I see over here in regards to race, because we had it at the barbecue we had the other weekend. There was, it's not unusual for me to be the only sort of socialist liberal in a group around here, and it's all white around here. And someone said, "Oh, you can't say bar black sheep anymore." I said, "Yes, you can. Of course you can. What can we say?" And there was quite an honest an interesting discussion about what you can say and what you call people. Oh, we used to call them coloured and you can't call them coloured. I said, no, what is important is that you understand what they want you to call them and how they want to be addressed. And I said, and it's important that you just don't say, well, I'm going to call them this because I can't be bothered. And I think it's kind of the same sort of thing. I think you have to meet halfway on this, and I think you have to say, like you say, you don't want to cause offence. And I think it's easy to, if you do it wrong, it's easy for you to say, oh, I'm so sorry. I'll get it right in future. And I think that's important. And I come across people who would not deliberately not make any effort to go even halfway to understanding.
But that takes me back, as you were speaking, like people who deliberately do it one way or the other. You also have to be careful. And maybe that's a little bit what Hannah, getting back to the story, is a little concerned about with her mother, is when people who are opposed to the transition find gentle ways to live with their opposition. So again, Daniel Ortberg and Dear Prudence received a letter from a parent who said, my child is trans and wants to change their pronouns, but for me, they were always my baby girl. I don't remember which direction the transition was, but let's say it was, woman to man. For me, she was always my baby girl. And even though I totally support her, I don't want to use him, blah, 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 because it's more about my connection to my child, whatever. It's not that I don't support that. And then Daniel's response was, you can always choose in life to be an asshole. But don't be surprised when your child chooses to exclude you from their life. It was great that you are free to make the choice to be an asshole, which is funny. I like that response.
Yeah, I think it's great when she comes. She says to her housemate, she said, "I'm non-binary." Dave finds the jar of homemade kombucha he was looking for and stands up. Like, for gender? And she says, "Yeah." They say, "Yeah," and he says, "Okay, cool." And then he moves off. And he just, sometimes sometimes people can surprise you about how easy it is to understand what you're trying to do.
Right. And there's also Brandon in the store where there's that beautiful line where his face goes through all the different changes of processing that Hannah has a girlfriend, right? Like, and it's like, cool.
Yes.
Which we all know, we can all picture what that is, or have maybe done it ourselves when you've gotten shocking information, maybe not specifically that, but something else, and you do the okay, right? Like you do like that, okay. Yeah.
Speaking of, my favorite joke in the piece, Hannah lives in a 4-bedroom apartment with 3 graduate students named Dave, David, and Joe. Isn't that lovely? Can we all just appreciate that for a second?
Am I missing something? Why is that a joke?
Because their names are funny.
What?
Dave, David, and it's the comic triple. We covered this. Dave, David, and Joe.
Okay. All right, Andy.
You people have no appreciation for comedy. It's highbrow.
We'll try and understand what you mean, Andy. We'll try and meet you halfway on this one.
One of the things I did like was the description of this house that no one can remember the last time was fully vacant. So it just has random pieces of furniture. And I lived in a couple off-campus houses in college, and one of them was the theater house. So how did this couch get here? No one knows. It has always been here because it's never been fully empty, right? There's always, anyway, it just reminded me of that house so much. College. Yeah. And everything, and that sticky thing, so sticky.
That's another good thing where David and Dave are sitting in the living room. I suppose it is quite fun, isn't it, David and Dave?
Yeah.
Anyway, is your foot better? Dave says no. He goes to the fridge to get another beer. So Dave said, "You're non-binary." "Oh yeah, sorry, I keep forgetting. I only told him." "Oh, it's cool. I just want to get it right." And then she says, "I appreciate." They say, "I appreciate that," and I think, yeah, that's kind of nice. That's how a lot of people are.
Yeah. Well, talking about the story has made me like it a little bit more. My biggest issue is you have something called suffering in motion. I need to see the suffering. It's just I get it. Talk to a therapist. Talk to your girlfriend. You'll be okay. I promise. But the low stakes stuff is what most of us experience. Right. Fortunate enough to, be in this demographic or class or whatever.
You know what else this makes me think of? There's a funny bit from The Office where D'Angelo comes in. Everyone's familiar. Good. And when he comes into the office, he announces he has a peanut allergy. And then much later, someone's throwing around a peanut butter sandwich to everyone. And he was like, "Oh, I can't be in here." And I was like, "Stop that. You could kill him." And D'Angelo's like, "Wait, what? No. But like I could get itchy. Not everything's a matter of life and death. I deserve to be comfortable."
Right. Low stakes suffering. And I do understand that for runners, like not being able to do a marathon you were training for is a big deal. I was also saying this in Slack to Gerald. One of my really good friends is like a super passionate runner. I get a lot of runner content that I hope she's not watching. I don't really care for. But if I whisper, she won't hear me. If I whisper into the microphone, I'm going to just whisper right into the microphone.
Now it's secret.
Now it's secret. But yeah, she's super passionate about it. I get that, but not living it myself, I'm like, you'll be okay. You'll be fine. There's other marathons. And also, I mean, again, not to make light of like injuries, but like don't all athletes have to like deal with injuries at some point in their athletic careers and then you get better and you jump back into it? Like, isn't that like every athlete in every sport ever? Again.
Or you don't get better.
Lady. Yeah, that sucks too. That's a risk, but plantar fasciitis should be okay.
Yeah, I think as Andy says, I nearly called him Dave then. I think as Andy, do you mind if I call you Dave, Andy?
I'm into it.
Call him Andrew, full name.
Andrew.
I prefer Dave.
I think the thing where she's aware, they are aware that it's a men's injury. I think that's really annoying for them, isn't it? To think that men get all these advantages.
Yeah, Andy's insight, and if you look at it about the unfairness of not identifying as a woman, being stuck with the like downsides of a woman's body is a good way to see it. She doesn't want to change it necessarily, right? That conversation about testosterone early on, or they don't want to change it, was very clearly like, I want to identify as they, but she did say, I like my body.
Yeah, it's just bullshit.
And when she tells the people at work about not doing the marathon, there's a great line that says, "No amount of wanting can change the reality of what their body can and can't do." So I think that's coming to realise that it's again the sort of pressure is off, the pressure of trying to be something that they're not, trying to be a better runner than men when they are already at a disadvantage because of the physicality of their body.
I want to read Edge now. Is that a real book? I didn't look it up. I'm thinking it must be about the history.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm curious.
I'm curious. Yeah, just a little snippet about like the East German athlete. Yeah, I was like, what? What?
Oh God! When I was into cycling and I had flu, just an ordinary flu one over Christmas one time. So I started reading about, there's this guy called Lance Armstrong, and there's all sorts of drug stuff. So I started reading about it. Oh boy, it goes deep and deep and deep and deep. And there's one of his teammates wrote a book about his experiences and things like, people nearly dying, people having to set alarms to wake up in the middle of the night because their blood is so thick. If they didn't wake up and do some exercise in the middle of the night, they'd die. Their heart would stop because the blood is too thick and rich, and the blood transfusions and stuff. And he had a bad blood bag, and he nearly died because of that. And his pee was black. And it is amazing that, again, the stuff people do. I was trying to explain to someone the other day about this, about once you're in a sort of competitive sport, the pressure, the internal pressure to go that little bit further and to have that little bit of advantage. You're all at sort of an elite level, but you can't quite beat these other people. So what do I have to do to get that little bit better? And the way that you can be sucked in to starting off with energy gels and energy bars and things like that, which are fairly normal, and then vitamin injections, which is a little bit grey, and then other things that you inject yourself, and pills and tablets and stuff, and it's like it's a whole sort of treadmill now. It's whatever it is. It's a whole bad analogy.
It's an entire bad analogy.
Yes. Anyway, we're off topic again. Sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah.
is there anything else you guys want to add about this story to get back on topic?
Yeah.
Or are we ready to rate?
Couple things just like structurally that I really liked is the headings, right?
Yes.
They're just right. They're neat. They give you like a little sum up. And especially right, like at the beginning, they're kind of right, like what's the story about, right? It's about identification. Hannah's faster than you. We are experiencing connection issues. Like, yeah, okay. Put me in that proper framework story. Thank you for these cute headings.
Yeah, it's funny. I thought they would annoy me, but actually they're pretty cute. They're pretty good.
Yeah,
Yeah, they're good.
well, because they're clever, right? It could have been a stupid thing, but the author chose to use it as a tool, right? Not as just a thing. It's
They're not decorative, is what you're saying.
right. They're not decorative.
Yeah.
The
author is very clever. Yeah.
Yeah, very clever. The only other thing I have in my notes is just the phrase "doing nothing does nothing."
Yeah, I'm just looking at that right now. It does nothing. Yeah, it's very clever. I like this.
Okay. So ratings. Andy, are you coming out at a 6? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, that's accurate.
Wow. Cool. Gerald?
I started off at a 5, being not too sure, but actually I think I'm. Yeah, this is going to stay with me, and it's sort of kind of interesting that, and I like the way it turns around. So no, I'm not feeling it. No, sorry, I changed my mind again. 5.5, nearly, but not quite.
Okay. I was coming in at a 3. You guys have convinced me to come up at a 4. I'm at a 4, I think.
Faint praise, that is.
The stakes were too low. The writing is clever. The author knows what she's doing, but the subject was just not something I could.
You know what? I'm gonna take one more stab at convincing you.
All right.
Here's what you're not carrying through with you to the story is what it starts with, right? Hannah has read it's a myth that sharks will die if they stop moving forward, but chooses to believe it anyway. If it was allowed, Hannah's driver's license would say Clark Hannah, height 5'5", hair blonde, eyes blue, a shark.
Yes. I love that line, but the rest of the story didn't have that levity.
Yeah, it did. I think you're bad at seeing jokes.
Okay.
And
Dave, David, and Joe is not the same as Hannah would like to be a shark.
No, but it's chock full with them. It's not. What the other one that we said in Slack, but we didn't bring up on the show.
The donuts part.
When Hannah was eating and the guy's like, "That's a lot of donuts for a little lady," and Hannah says, "Go fuck yourself."
I did like that. I like that a lot.
Of course, you like that.
I also like the part where she was looking at online forums, but they're just full of bad advice.
Right. It's very clever, very funny, well done, well crafted. Used all the tools. And
fine, 4.5, Andy.
Good.
You get you squeak another half out of me.
Thank you.
Well, I'm going up to a 6 now. So
oh my goodness, Andy!
Andy's done such a good job of selling it. It's it is very, very clever. It's very clever, very well written.
So, what are we reading next week?
Well, next week we're reading a short story.
Okay, cool. Do you know what the short story is called?
Absolutely,
or who the author
I do.
is?
I picked it, so I should know what it's called. And it's by Christina Perez Brubaker, and it is titled Silverfish.
Okay, so we're reading Silverfish by Christina Perez Brubaker.
That's one way to say it.
Right, there's many ways. First name Christina. Okay. All right. Before you go, share your suffering in our forum of bad advice, the Facebook group Literary Roadhouse Readers. Our ambitions are nowhere near as lofty as running a marathon, but we would like to keep this podcast going for a long time. Support our podcast expenses by making a contribution at patreon.com/Literary Roadhouse. Every bit helps. And as always, share this podcast with a physical therapist in training in your life. Until next time, read a good story. I should have said share the story with Dave, David, and Joe.
Yeah, yes. That would have been funny.
Here we go. As always, share this podcast with Dave, David, and Joe. Until next time.
Read a good story.